Good morning, everyone. My name is Ernie Humphrey. I'm the Vice President of Educational Programs for Performative, the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, the biggest challenges facing finance organizations, how companies are overcoming them. Today, we will be delivering content around the most critical challenge faced by accounting and finance teams as they strive to improve the productivity of their staff and the effectiveness of their operations. Our featured speaker, Tom Kelley, will focus on offering practical insights and peer benchmark data from a recent survey of thousands of financial professionals on the greatest obstacles and plans to improve results. And more specifically, how finance leaders are streamlining key financial processes such as order-to-cash, budgeting, financial reporting and planning, order management and fulfillment, procure-to-pay, and financial reporting in period and close. I would like to thank NetSuite and Adaptive Planning, whose commitment to thought leadership help us make this event possible today and delivered at no cost. A quick note about today's agenda. First, we'll hear a presentation from our featured speaker, Tom Kelley, and then we'll move into an interactive Q&A session where we will spend the remainder of our hour. We would like this to be an interactive experience for you. So if you have any questions at any time, please go to the questions area in your GoToWebinar control panel and send us your questions. We can't promise to get all of them in, but we'll do our best, and we'll follow up afterwards on any questions we did not get to today. A few more logistical notes on the webinar. A link to today's presentation and video of the webinar will be sent out to the attendees within 24 hours of the event and will be posted on performative.com. Those who would like CPE credits will need to answer all polling questions during the event and should have pre-registered for CPE credit. For any questions on CPE credits, please contact Tanya Walsh, twalsh@performative.com. We'll have Tanya's contact information available again later on in the presentation. Final note, you will be asked to take a short survey regarding today's webinar. We really appreciate your feedback regarding our event today. We always strive to improve the ROI we offer attendees for their valuable time. Finally, a quick word about Performative. Performative is the largest and fastest growing online community and resource for senior level corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. Performative connects corporate finance leaders to provide instant advice and insights on the tough financial and strategic challenges they face every day. We're going to go ahead and get started here. We're going to introduce our featured speaker, Tom Kelley, Managing Director at T. Edward Incorporated. As the Managing Director of T. Edward Incorporated, Tom serves as a strategic partner and CFO, CIO for several unique companies. Portfolio companies include Cardia Health Systems and On Point Medical Diagnostics, organizations that were created by commercializing intellectual property software from leading healthcare institutions. His insights have been gleaned from years of working with clients, striving to build on-demand environments that leverage the cloud to ensure crisp and timely execution of a company's strategy. He has shifted many business leaders' perspectives and assumptions about how to efficiently and effectively run a business completely in the cloud. Tom has held senior management positions with large publicly traded companies like PepsiCo and Deluxe Corporation, as well as small cap and privately held entities such as Ebenex and PeopleNet Communications. He is a CPA with an MBA in finance from Fordham University and a BA in accounting from North Carolina State University. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to our featured speaker, Tom Kelley. Tom, go ahead and take it away for us.
All right, thank you, Renee. I appreciate that, and I'm glad you added in the the comment of it, not North Carolina, but North Carolina State, because I'm not a Tar Heel, but for those who are Tar Heels out there, I hold no ill feelings. On that note, what I want to do here today is I'll be talking the first part of the presentation about a survey that was done by the Institute of Management Accountants, the IMA. If you go to their website, I'm pretty sure you can find it, or I'm sure Performative can send you out the actual link to get the details of the study. But what it focused on were the biggest challenges facing finance. And the survey was sent out, I think, at the end of last year in December to over, I think, 50,000 members of the IMA. To get into a little bit of the demographics on it, just to kind of set the level here, from an industry standpoint, almost 30% came in from manufacturing. You can see there up on the left-hand side, finance, business service, et cetera. And from an industry type standpoint, whether you were publicly traded, privately held, nonprofit, obviously the biggest piece came in on the privately held side, with publicly traded encompassing almost 30% of respondents. Location and job title, most of the locations obviously were in the Americas. and then Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific, and Europe. And then from a job title standpoint, accountants, surprise, surprise, direct controllers were the largest respondents, and you can read on down the line there as a major. So from a demographic standpoint, it was a very, very large survey. I think it's fairly well represented in terms of size of companies, locations in companies, types of companies. And so now, with that, let's get into some of the actual, or let me just say then, I apologize. From a revenue standpoint, you're looking at obviously a well spread out mix of revenue and even employee count. So organizations responded to this with less than 50 employees and over 10,000 employees. So a well, stretched out population sample. So let's talk about some of the questions that they asked. And one of the things they were wanting to find out is productivity. And what its productivity, increases over the past 3 years has been. And what they found out is while it may call to mind that productivity of manufacturing workers is improving, productivity is obviously a very top concern of accounting and finance departments. And you can see that's shown here that 70% of the survey respondents reported productivity increases in the area in the last 3 years. And with half of those reported that productivity industry, their increases were greater than 5%. So productivity has been a focus, and productivity has been improving. And we'll get into some of the details as to why we think the productivity has been improving. And in summary, what organizations have seemed to have done is taken a step back, looked at their business processes, and improved them. And this could be done from a methodology standpoint to kind of scope out how should the process be working. But if you look at the next item there, improvement in technology, and I know I am kind of a real big believer in the cloud, but the ease of use, I think, of some of the technology and I think barriers to getting that technology, as they start to come down, I think organizations, large and small, are able to take big advantage of what's out there. And we're talking about things that could be just a microcosm within an organization. Take travel and expense management as an example. For those of us out there that are still using Excel spreadsheets and pushing paper around, there's probably 10 companies, and I'm sure that number increases every day, of organizations that just focus on taking that one microcosm of a process within the finance function and improving it from all facets, not just how it works from a methodology standpoint, but how the automation of that works. So, even going to zero paper in this area has been accomplished by many organizations. Next, the survey looked at the permanence of this change in productivity. So, we can make improvements in productivity by adding a lot of resources to a problem, but then the question is, what's the sustainability of that? And the changes in productivity in the finance and accounting functions, organizations are not, in most cases, temporary, as was indicated by the respondents. 1/4 of the respondents indicated that the changes in productivity were permanent, and another half indicated that they were the start of a long-term trend. So at least the leaders are feeling that they're addressing some of these concerns, and they are making improvements, or they're starting to make improvements, and the feeling is, based, I guess, on those results that they've seen, that the expected, continued improvement or the permanence of that improvement is going to continue to improve, or it will be set in stone, and they don't intend or don't expect to go back to having perhaps bad processes. Take the example of the travel and expense I just gave. Somebody who's going to go onto the automated side of things and have their users using smartphones to fill out their travel and expense report, I don't think they're now going to ask them to go back to filling out Excel spreadsheets. So some pretty interesting things are happening out there as far as the permanence of the productivity. So obviously there's this big need for productivity improvement. So what's the extent that is increasing the productivity? What is it a priority? Not only in your organization, but perhaps even in your individual goals. And many CFOs, and sometimes many of the competing priorities that are also addressed, only 10% of organizations indicated that the increased productivity was the highest priority, although nearly half of it considered to be one of their top 3 priorities. So that's kind of an interesting perspective in that you have kind of 2 competing pieces there. And last, before I get into some of the examples that I've experienced personally, what are the investments with the potential to increase productivity? In other words, where do you want to put your time and effort? And I do think this the first one here, automation of business processes, is pretty important. I think in the past where we may have had great ideas about how we wanted to do things, the next step was always, okay, what vehicle, what apparatus, I'm not trying to use the word software or technology, what is it that we're going to do to put in place that's going to enable this strategy or idea? And like I said earlier, I think what we're starting to find is the ubiquitous nature of technology today is really allowing organizations to take some giant leap forward with minimal investment, frankly, in terms of what some of the cost is. So, so at a very high level, that's what the report had. The report's over about 30 pages. I suggest if you want to get the read details of it, that you go to the IMA website. And like I said, Ernie and the folks at Performative may provide you with the link to get even more insight into the survey. But let's talk now about the ever-changing role of finance. And we have our financial person here in the middle, looking a little scared, a little overworked, a little overburdened, and kind of surrounding himself here with the many things that are happening, right? So organizations out there that are in the software industry or provide services, you may have to manage recurring revenue. And I can't tell you how complex it is to manage recurring revenue, not just from a billing standpoint, so being able to get the information to the customer, have the customer make the payment, make sure all that works flawlessly so we don't have any disconnects in the process, to the point of recognizing that revenue. So there's a lot of things that are going on just in that one particular area. The resources, many organizations, as we can see with the unemployment reports these days, the resources are really stretched pretty thin. Many people, both in large and small companies, are having to wear many, many different hats. Manage very complex pricing models. So not just from a revenue recognition standpoint or recurring billing, but organizations are starting to have more and more complex pricing modules. Think of the phone companies or the airline industries or whatever. It can get pretty complex out there. Real-time reporting. I think what organizations in finance, if they're really going to be successful, they only have to be like NASA was in the old days, and that you need to be able to tell them everything they need to know, they being whether it's a salesperson or service person or whatever, almost on a real-time basis so that they can make the right decisions. And then global support, security, and compliance, as we have the ever-changing palette of things that are happening to us across the continuum, whether it's here in the U.S. or in Europe or whatever. There are many, many things and ideas and laws and regulations that we have to make sure we adhere to make sure that we're a compliant organization on a day-in and day-out basis. So this is a picture of Ernie in his early days. I apologize, Ernie. I'm not sure who that is. It's not me. But in any event, what we're having to go to in this world of finance these days is, bean counters. That's not what organizations need. We need to have well-rounded CFOs, controllers, financial planners, you name it. It's almost at this point. Many of the things I've talked about, even up to this point, managing resources, managing the complexity of regulations, managing the complexity of certain things within our processes. It's no longer, 1 + 1 = 2. There's a lot more that goes on a day-to-day basis from everybody in the finance staff. So you have to be, maybe for lack of a better term, almost a general manager in some sense to really make sure you're adding value to the organization, both as part of, the initial team you're part of, but then the groups that you support within your organization, depending upon, what type of financial support you're providing on a day-in and day-out basis. So here's the graph we started out with, which were the biggest challenges facing finance. And I think we can categorize these into 3 key areas. And the biggest one, obviously, we talked about is improving processes, or maybe the term streamlining or improve. And everything from streamlining processes to even the reporting cycle. So how quickly can you get those books closed? Does it take you 5 days? Does it take you 30 days? We combine that, going back to the real-time reporting I was talking about. We have to get these books closed quickly because we need to give people the information real-time so that they make the right decisions. And if you look down on the right-hand side there, you can see accelerating invoices or automating order management. That's kind of getting a little bit more razor-guided focus in terms of what you need to do from your process standpoint within your organization really focusing on those areas that you view, at least at this point, or the respondents viewed, as being the areas that they want to try to streamline and improve immediately, feeling that they get the best return for those items. One item kind of stuck out for me, and that was the Transformational CFO, and I've kind of talked about that a little bit, being the Superman, if you will, or the general manager, but I'll talk a little bit more about this concept of the Transformational CFO and what at least I believe it to be and what we should all be thinking about as we do our jobs day in and day out. And then finally, maybe for lack of a better category, real-time collaboration. So it's not just a matter of getting real-time information, but being able to collaborate over that information. So maybe the days are gone in terms of arguing whether it's right or wrong, but the days are there as what should I do with this information? I'm not quite sure I have everything I need to make the right decision at this point in time. So there we're talking about everything from real-time visibility to upgrading our ERP, to connecting the front and the back office. So if you remember in Apollo 13, the engineers in Houston there can be talking to the astronauts that are up in the command module. So I kind of want to go back to business kind of 101, for lack of a better term, and I say plan your work and work your plan. And it's one thing to say that we as an organization do a very good job of budgeting, planning and forecasting, but it's another thing to make sure you have the capability to carry that out so that you can engage your audience, engage the key decision makers, engage the people that have the right information at the right time, so that when we put together our budget, our plan, or our forecast, it's accurate, it's actionable, and we can do something about it. So this is an area where I really do think organizations should kind of maybe go back to the beginning. There's many different ways you can do this, right? We have rolling forecasts. People believe, depending upon your industry you're in, everything's the same for about 90 days out. It constantly changes. Whatever your cycle is, I do really feel that companies that are successful, and whether it's improving a process or making more sales or cutting costs, are those organizations that look at their business as a portfolio. And they connect that portfolio from the top to the bottom, meaning that it's not just that we're going to return 15% EBITDA, but everybody in that continuum, everybody who's managing that portfolio item, whether it's cost of goods sold or whether it's office supplies or whether it's revenue, they understand what levers they have to pull at their discretion. And if they pull the right levers, they're going to get the biggest bang for their buck in doing so. So having these things integrated, front to back office, top to bottom, I think is extremely important these days. And it is an exercise that has been going on in business since the beginning of business, quite frankly. But I think now we have the ability with certain types of technologies and some of the methodologies I just mentioned that we really have the opportunity to put something together that at least allows us to kind of steer the ship in the right direction, to make the right decisions, but knowing that the decisions that are being made on factual information from the highest positions in an organization down to the frontline performers. So next I want to talk about the Transformational CFO, and we've all heard the term oxymoron. I have been told this many times, but I love this picture, Death Valley Health Center. So, the two words Transformational CFO, I've been told in and of themselves are an oxymoron. I do believe, as we as an organization, or you in your organization, or as individuals in that organization, really have to think about how you want to act as, and it does say CFO, but frankly, I would just view it as, transformational, whatever, fill in your title thereafter. You really have to be transformational in how you operate in this day and age, and that's everything from how you interact with your colleagues and your employees to the type of skill set you have in making a financial analysis or assumption based on information. And so from there, I really do think you need to expand your horizons and become more well-rounded. So we've talked a little bit about technology, and I do think you need to educate yourself, particularly in the financial world, of what technologies are available, and not only the technologies that are going to help you, say, as I just had the slide earlier, put together a budget and plan, but maybe you need to verse yourself on those technologies that are going to help with accelerating the invoicing process, right, or connecting the front and the back office. And these technologies can be fairly extensive, expensive, intensive, that they can be pretty easy. There's plenty of collaboration project software applications out there that are maybe $30 per month for unlimited users. There has to be a conscious or an awareness out there of what's available and what you can use. And the nice thing about some of these things is you may have a real issue. When I talked earlier about that portfolio, the financial statement portfolio that we manage, I think we all know that for perhaps maybe for one day we need to be managing cost of goods sold, but maybe the next day we need to change that management focus to travel and expense management, or the cost of what does travel cost us. So the point I'm trying to make there is there might be a certain application out there that can fit the need for your particular issue of the day, if you will. It's not something that you have to implement and as to be a legacy system for the organization for years and years to come, but it might allow you to, let's say, crack the nut and fix that particular issue or process and streamline that process within an area, and then you can move on to the next one. So when I talk about transformational CFO or transformational financial person, really push yourself to go outside of I'm just in charge of compliance and regulation, I'm just in charge of putting together the financial forecast. If you're really going to be successful and effective, I think, in what you do, you have to expand your horizons. You have to become somewhat of an expert in some of these other areas, or at least educate yourself on what's available out there so that you can help the team from a collective standpoint. And this is a little bit maybe more in a pictorial way, understanding the transformational CFO. But when you think about many companies today, procure to payment, right? So there's one way to do that where I may invoice a customer for a product or whatever. That customer gets the invoice, sends it to their accounts payable department, processes it, cuts the check, we receive the check, we code the check, we relieve the receivable, we enter cash. There's that way of doing it, and this day and age is, I'm pretty sure most people have cell phones on the call right now, and you have your, many people have their credit card synced up to that, so it automatically just goes right and hits your credit card. And that's an easy thing maybe on the consumer side, but we all know on the back end there's a lot of complexities with that. People get issued new credit cards with new numbers, you name it. These are things that you have to stay on top of and make sure that you're, optimizing those so we're not having a degradation in terms of what our cash flow is, or for that matter, we making it easier for the customer when they sign up for our product that it's a simple slam dunk from a payment standpoint. So there are many things we can look at across this continuum, and even let's talk about analytics for a second. You as an organization can sit down, come up with a great budget forecast or plan. You may have your KPIs or your metrics as to what you're going to do. But now the question is, how do you make sure you get those metrics in the hands of the people that need them, and more importantly, when they need them? That's a big thing these days. So, there's a lot of education or a lot of effort has to happen beforehand to make sure you have the right metric, right? So you're not telling manufacturing, let's say, to have the lowest cost per unit produced, so they're blowing the doors off production, and the sales force is over there saying I can only sell this much, and you've got large inventories stacking up in your warehouse. So there's obviously some good methodologies out there that we should follow, but then more importantly, how do we make sure we're getting that information in the hands of people in a very effective way, very cost-effective way, such that we as an organization can stay on course, be nimble, make decisions that we have to make at a point in time that are going to lead to our ultimate success. So what works? I think what really works is linking visibility and productivity. The first one, fewer systems equals less versions of the truth. I don't know if Ernie had a picture of me there, but I used to have a wonderful head of hair. But I can't tell you if I really sat back and said I'm going to write out how many hours I've spent doing certain things in my career, I can't tell you how many hours I've spent coming into a meeting, and manufacturing has their numbers, and sales has their numbers, operations has their numbers, and finance has their numbers, and none of which kind of come together and meet, and we spend probably 75% of the meeting arguing about what information is right. So I can express this in more ways than not, but limiting the number of systems you have so that you have less versions of the truth, the better off you're going to be. And let me be clear about something. I don't want to be hypocritical here. So I mentioned earlier that there's a lot of applications out there that you can choose from. It's very important, though, that you understand that those applications have to somehow, if necessary, get that information into the reporting system that you're using as an organization. And so there needs to be something at the center of your organization, that heart would say, that beats, that brings everything together, such that we as an organization have one set of data that we're operating off of. Which then talks to point 2, the integrated suite. And you can do these on-premise or off-premise. So there's a lot of things to choose from. I'll leave it up to your discretion of what fits best for your company. But having the ability to link the ERP to the customer relationship management system, to the professional services administration, to even e-commerce, so that we have everything connected. So there's not separate databases and there's plugs and plays between all these separate databases. It's extremely important we do this, not just to mention for streamlining the process, but also to make sure that we maintain that productivity and that we're focusing on the factual word, if you will, as opposed to 4 or 5 different interpretations of that. Number 3, I talked about real-time analytics, and really this is what drives results. So the quicker we can get information into the hands of the decision makers, the better off they're going to be in making those decisions. And the quicker that information is there and it's accurate and in the right place at the right time, the better off the entire organization is going to be. So again, it's an easy thing to say. It's another thing to do the homework and understand what the metrics should be, and then what type of technology are we going to use, both hardware and software, to get information into the people's hands at the right time. And finally, number 4, embracing new technology for lower total cost of ownership. And I'll just make a statement: cloud-based products, from my standpoint, and there's a lot of, I'm just going to say personal experience, so we can't argue about that. My personal experience has been with the cloud. I have never seen a situation where it's cost me more. At worst, it's been a wash. From a cost standpoint, I can't tell you then, if we look at numbers 1, 2, and 3, I've got one version of the truth, I've got an integrated suite, and I'm able to deliver real-time analytics almost on a minute-by-minute basis. I can't tell you the efficiency improvements I've gotten from it. So suffice to say, if you haven't embraced the cloud yet or you're not aware of it, I strongly recommend you educate yourself as to what's available and what might work for you and your organization. Here's a real-time example. It's kind of called a hairball, but this is an example of one company that I currently manage today and all of the systems that they had in place. And I'm not kidding you, I probably have not got enough connections there. But if you look around this, the upper left-hand corner, operations and other, the organization uses Amazon Web Services, Rackspace, and Pivotal Tracker. From a billing standpoint, there were 3 billing things being used: Chargeify, 3Scale, and Authorize.net. From a Salesforce automation and marketing standpoint, we were using 3 different versions. From a support standpoint, this was interesting here, we had 3 different components that we were using. None of them talked to each other. All of them supposedly had the same customer database in them. It was a disaster. And then if you look on the administration and governance standpoint, everything from how we save our documents to how we process our travel and expense management, you name it. I mean, you had all this stuff going around, and then guess what? I hope some people are laughing out there. We had somebody in the middle there managing all these wondrous spreadsheets that were pulling information from these 15, 20 different systems, so that we went to meetings, we hopefully had one set of data that we were trying to perp it on so that people could make decisions. It was less than efficient, to say the least. So single source of data. I think the business suites that are out there today do a very good job of closing this gap. Now, it's not to say that they're going to solve every single issue, but they will solve, I would say, if you take an 80-20 approach to life and things, it'll definitely get you 80% of the way there. In many cases, depending upon how, close you want to hold yourself to the ideal, you might find you can literally just use the platform and not have to have any bolt-on solutions. So whether it's you as an organization, from the CEO to the e-com manager to the shipping manager, but what's also very interesting to me is now you can start involving the outside, the 4 walls of the organization, your customer base. Maybe they can even interact with the system, vendors and partners. It's pretty profound. Think of the Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. There, he gets the people to paint the white fence because it's a great thing to do. Think about if you can get your vendors in there kind of indicating when they've shipped certain things, and they're literally putting the stuff into your system. I've done it. I've seen others do it. It can be done. And then when we go back to our resources are stretched too thin, well, they're not our resources. They're basically our vendors and partners that are doing that work. So that's how you get that real-time information into the system. So it's amazing what you can do across time and space. Another thing that's happening these days is global operations and consolidation. So for your organizations out there that have not only more than one subsidiary, but more than one subsidiary, let's say, in a different country, you have to do many different things. You have to understand what those countries' requirements are as far as consolidation or accounting purposes are. When you roll it up to a U.S.-based GAAP financial statement, you need to make sure that the changes are taking place. I can't tell you the amount of time and effort and the individual manual spreadsheets that we would have out there trying to piece all this stuff together. Oh, and by the way, why don't we try to figure out if we can get a spreadsheet in another language? There's plenty of systems out there today that are multilingual, that provide the capability, understanding, let's say, UK accounting policies, and understanding the difference between UK and US requirements. So depending upon, we need to develop a consolidated statement that's US GAAP-based or it's UK accounting-based. You literally have the ability, once you go through the process, once you understand how to set the stuff up, you now have the ability to, and I kid you not, press a button and do your consolidation, and you can generate a financial statement, a balance sheet, or an income statement that's going to be based on either one requirement, depending upon what the need is at a point in time. So suffice to say, in my mind, I think the on-premise software, if you look at what's going on with some of the bigger companies, SAP, they just acquired SuccessFactors, and they're starting to really focus on having just pure cloud offerings. And even Oracle has just come out recently talking about how they are, have all these wonderful cloud applications and how they all, sync together. So even the big players out there that were almost just exclusively on-premise now recognize the fact that things are going to the cloud very quickly, very rapidly, and the reality behind this is the security behind it, the reliability behind it. What I like about this is I don't have to worry about my internal IT staff and what's their uptime for email, the financial system. I guarantee you when you have an outage on Salesforce.com, it's almost front page news in the Wall Street Journal. So I love having millions of people making sure that my IT department is maintaining the uptime that they guaranteed in the contract I signed. So that's another thing to think about. You don't have to worry about being the only one that's aware of it, and unfortunately being the last person to know. You'll know about it real time, particularly if you subscribe to Twitter. It's out there immediately. So let's talk a little bit about transforming the business with the cloud. And this is a pretty cool graphic. The year is 1993. Pretty much paper-based. We've got landline phones, fax machines, yellow pages, an actual book, right? Limited channels in terms of what you can do from a point-of-sale standpoint. This would probably take days. And to be fair, if you were a multi-billion-dollar international conglomerate, maybe you had billions of dollars to spend on your IT information system, and you could maybe do this in a little more expedient fashion than days. I mean, you could do it in a day. But when you think of 2012 and the advent of the real-time capabilities across the continuum, mobile phones, mobile capturing devices, email, the whole idea of being completely paperless now, we can go to digital documents. That information is real-time, and it's not just real-time between me and the plant or the sales office I have down the street. It's real-time between me here in the U.S. and my manufacturing plant over in China. I mean, it is that profound. And hey, guess what? We don't have to spend billions and billions of dollars to do this. It's there, it's proven, it's accessible, it's ready to go. You just need to access it and make sure from a requirement standpoint that it fits your business need. So the ability to, I don't know if it's transforming business with the cloud. I think it's just transforming those processes that we used to do, let's say in 1993, that were paper-based, or we had to fax information, and we can make it all electronic in today's world. And there's plenty of vehicles and conduits out there that allow us to do that in a very cost-effective and efficient fashion. So what does the cloud enable finance to do? And I said this before. I think you need to look at it. It can scale a distributed finance function. I say think NASA. So think NASA, and particularly if you haven't seen the movie Apollo 13, I recommend you rent it and see it, and think about your finance group as the Gene Kranz and the folks there in Houston, and think about your salespeople as the folks in the space capsule. Right? We're trying to give them real-time information to help them out. Now, obviously, that was a life and death situation. We hopefully don't have any of those out there relative to finance and sales relationships. But that's how you have to be thinking here today. And what the nice thing is about this is you can think that way, and you can make it happen today. You don't have to think about it and then say, my gosh, how are we going to develop an IT infrastructure that's going to let us do it? It's out there today. You can just leverage it. Some other things to think about as you're looking at this: SAS 70 Type 2 compliance. All of the the key cloud providers out there, they have to do that. They've done it. You don't have to come up with an infrastructure and then figure out all the SAS 2 type compliant. You can just make sure that they've been SAS 2 type compliant, and you're there. And let me just digress for a second. I want to talk about automating end-to-end processes, and one that is it's kind of comical, but it's about checks. And I'm going to go through a little bit of a rant here, but let's just take the normal small to medium-sized business, and I'm sure this happens at very large companies, but let's think about, we are going to cut a check. What happens to cut a check? Well, first we have a purchase order. Somebody wants to buy some pens, right? So they fill out that purchase order. They send it to the next person. Hopefully that person signs it. Great. They sign it. They approve it. Then that goes to the person who can actually buy the pen, if that's the type of company you are, so you go out and buy the pen. The pen then comes in, and that document is sitting in maybe the front desk administrative assistant, or it's sitting out in shipping and receiving. The pen comes in. Somebody receives the pen in. They receive it against that purchase order. That's great. And the receiving document is attached to the purchase order. Wonderful. Now that receiving document and purchase order goes to maybe somebody else who's going to say, okay, this has been received. It's here. Great. I'm going to put it into accounts payable for payment. So I enter it into accounts payable for payment. Now it's sitting in the accounts payable payment, and we're waiting for the batches to come. So now it comes to the point where the batches are run, and the big stack of paper is brought to the CFO's desk. The CFO takes that big batch of paper and goes through it and makes sure, hey, I'm signing all these things and approving all these things. Great, these are all good, run the checks. Person takes the big batch back, refiles everything, runs the checks, brings the checks to the CFO's desk. The CFO starts signing the checks. Guess what? The CFO forgot about what they approved and don't remember something. Hey, Sally, can you go and pull that voucher file for this, this, and this? Sure, I'll go pull it. Sally goes, pulls the voucher file. She brings it back to the CFO. The CFO looks at it and goes, oh, yes, I remember this. You know, I'm losing my mind. It's been a busy day. I'm good with this. I'll sign the checks. The CFO then says, okay, Sally, you can refile these. Now you can take these checks and send it to the person who's going to put the checks in the envelope. The person puts the checks in the envelope, puts the postage on it, and mails it out to the end vendor. Isn't that an incredible process to go through? And I'll guarantee you, more companies than not go through that process. What if I told you you can automate that entire process, beginning to end? And you don't need all these different types of software. There's a thing out there called a PDF. I'm sure you've all heard of it. If you have a scanning machine, you scan it in. Now you get that document electronic. You can route that document electronically. And if you have a system that allows you to attach those documents to the transaction record, now I'm attaching these electronic documents to the system record so that anybody at any point in time can go into the system and look at, somebody ordered a pen, somebody approved a pen, somebody received the pen in, somebody submitted that voucher to accounts payable to process, and now it comes to the point where I need to approve checks, and I go in there and I literally click a box, I hit enter. There's a company out there now that takes that file and generates the checks, sends it to whoever the vendor is, and there is never a piece of paper other than that first piece of paper that you started with. 100% electronic. You don't have to go out and buy checks. And from a cost standpoint, what if I told you it doesn't cost you, and this is hard dollars, between the envelope, the paper, the check, the toner, and the postage that goes on that envelope is as expensive or less than what you currently do today. If anybody wants to know more on that, give me a call. I'll be happy to talk you through it. I've done it for over 10 companies. But that exists in spades today out there. All right, I thank you for listening to my diatribe, but let's talk about some other things. So more tightly integrated analytics. We've talked about the need for those, but now they're integrated. We've done the work, but they're real-time integrated, which is a big difference. And I've got integrated analytics. They're integrated, but I'm getting into people's hands immediately when they need them. Automatic upgrades. I don't know those of you who've gone through upgrades of your system, but we'll be down for this week, or usually it's the weekend, turns out to be the week or several weeks. In the cloud world, you go home on Friday, hopefully you disconnect from the grid, and you come in on Monday, you turn the switch on, you get the latest and greatest software. And oh, guess what, by the way, all the points that you have in that system that are connecting with, let's say, a partner software, they all work, believe it or not. So at the end of the day, what I really think you can do is you can reallocate that IT budget from a maintenance, if you will, make, God forbid, everything doesn't work, to the controller of the user experience. So I believe, as I'm saying, our CFOs, we need to be kind of like NASA. I think it'd be nice for the IT folks to be the controller of the user experience, as opposed to telling everybody, you can't use this because it's not approved, or whatever the reason is that makes IT not fun people to deal with at times. For valid reasons, though. Here's another thing to think about, and I've engaged in quite a bit of this lately. I don't know if this is really the generally accepted term, but work shifting, telecommuting, whatever it is, think about your office is anywhere. So going back to the whole check rant that I gave you folks, everything I just told you about, yes, you have to have somebody receiving the stuff in on the shipping receiving area, but if you're in the finance area, there's not one thing that I said that you'd have to be on site to do to cut that check. You could be anywhere in the world at any time of the day, as long as you have high-speed internet access, you can cut a check. That's what I'm talking about here. So your office is anywhere. You could be in the actual headquarters building. You could be in your car, hopefully pulled over on the side of the road, not driving while we're doing this. Or you could be in your home office, wherever that location is, or Starbucks, or Caribou. I don't want to say, whatever your coffee shop of preference is. And then most of them will have high-speed internet access. What's interesting is when you start to drill down on this, though, the savings to the employees and the employer and the environment, it goes across the board. So for us, those are going to be green. We're not driving our car back and forth. We don't have this huge infrastructure of IT equipment sitting in a building. And when I say that, maybe it's sitting in a building in some part of the world, and there's redundancy. But if there's 1,000 companies out there, we don't all of us have our own servers, et cetera, et cetera. And what's very interesting about this, and they've done studies on this, and you can go out there and Google it, but it increases business performance, and believe it or not, it increases employee satisfaction. What's interesting about this is I would argue employees become more productive, and they actually work longer, but they're more satisfied. So a little bit more detail. They say work shifters are 55% more engaged. And when telework policies are introduced, companies report a 25% reduction in attrition. And these are facts. Work shifting actually increases productivity, say by 27%. My experience is that's probably a low number. 72% of employees say a flexible work arrangement would cause them to choose one job over another. So imagine this. If you manage by getting the job done, not necessarily you need to be sitting at your desk, from 9 to 5 every day, but you need to get the books closed by the end of today. And I could tell that person that, I don't care where you close the books from, just get them closed. And they can do things like maybe go to their child's recital or a child's sporting event, right? Or maybe they can actually go on the golf course, a little something for themselves. Whatever it is, if you know your responsibility, your requirements are to get something done, but you're not going to time box that and say you have to get it done with this in time frame, and I have to see you doing it so I can make sure that you're productive. Believe me, when you use some of this technology out there, you're going to know whether somebody's productive because there's an audit trail. You're going to know how much time they spent on things. So there's actually less to hide when you're not sitting there in front of your boss. There's less to hide. The expected turnover rate for employees who do not have the flexibility is almost twice the rate of those who do. So what enables work shifting? Well, as far as what enables work shifting, I think we've talked about that a lot here today. I think technology is a big thing, but it's also mindset. So keep that in mind. So in conclusion, there are some significant challenges facing CFOs and finance organizations due to the global and economic turbulence, hyper competition, and more. Hyper competition from people sitting right next to you. Most urgent challenge of the CFO team is streamlining processes and improving productivity. And I think we've given some very good ideas as to how you can streamline processes and improve productivity. And business process improvement, unification of business systems, I can't stress that enough. Better business intelligence, I think when you unify your systems, it actually lends itself to better business intelligence. And I think you can do this. You can do it on-premise, but I would encourage you to look at the cloud and the critical tools that can provide you with to improve finance and the finance department's productivity, and not just finance, but the entire organization. And the last thing I want you all to remember is this, and this is actually a test that one of my sons took. He's a very smart child. The question was, find X. My son circled it and said, here it is. You can imagine the challenges I have. I'd be happy for anybody to email me on parenting skills, but the thing I want to get across here is simplicity. Sometimes the simplest solutions are often the cleverest. So I want to encourage you to look for the things that are going to help you to get things done. Don't look at it as a long-term commitment if it doesn't need to be. And if it does need to be a long-term commitment, spend your time looking at those things that are simplistic in nature, that do make sense, that are pretty straightforward, that not only you as a finance person are going to be able to clam onto and understand, but the rest of the people in your organization are going to be able to understand those things too, interact with it, and make themselves, more productive, a better employee, better people.
Great, Tom. Thanks for that great and insightful content. So I appreciate the backdrop there of kind of giving those great challenges for the CFOs, and then the critical role that technology can play into putting those from theory into practice, and how the cloud can do that. Technology is obviously a key piece of that. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and launch our polling questions. We'd love to have everybody in the audience take a few seconds and answer the polling questions. The polling questions were designed to kind of level set a few of the questions that we thought were very interesting that were asked in the survey that Tom is speaking about today. So we'll go ahead and launch those polling questions. A final note, for those of you in today's audience who are after CPE credits today, you will need to answer both of our polling questions here today. Again, if you have any questions at all, please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A area. We'd like to get to all your questions. We have a great opportunity to get Tom's insights here this morning. So in order to be mindful of our time, I'm going to go ahead and start the Q&A session as we leave that polling question up for a few. So Tom, first question is around what is the biggest challenge in cloud computing? So there's obviously a love affair with the cloud. So if someone is sold on the cloud, how do they dive in, and what are the biggest challenges they'll face on that front?
I'd say in the biggest word, and I don't mean this in a negative way, it's ignorance. Ignorance in the sense that when people feel like your data isn't going to be under your control in the four walls of the building you're in, there's a big fear, if you will. Think about the wonderful Michelin tire commercials that I believe they continue to run, but you had the baby in the middle of the tire, and the baby's smiling and happy, and God forbid, if you didn't have Michelin tires on your car, you're a bad parent, and you're endangering your children. So I find a lot of correlation to that with the cloud. Obviously, a lot of that has been coming down lately, but I think what you have to do is it's not going to be very hard to prove out the functionality or the capability. It's also not going to be pretty hard to prove out what the uptime is, the reliability. They guarantee a certain amount of uptime. So what's interesting to me about that, 995, I think, is if you look at that in terms of days, if you have a company guaranteeing 95.5% uptime, I believe you'll be down for 3 days unplanned across 365 days. And sometimes when people see that at first, they go, well, yeah, I can't afford to be down for 3 days. How am I going to run my business? Well, the thing you have to know is I don't know of any cloud provider, established cloud providers, that have been down for 3 days straight. It's usually an hour here, 15 minutes there. That's something you need to keep in mind. And I'd strongly recommend you think long and hard then about what you've experienced in your organization, because I can tell you more times than not, I've been without email for a week in some cases, and this was an internal IT department that was managing our business, and email is a critical application for organizations. So I strongly recommend people kind of take a step back and let's put things in perspective in that regard. As far as security is concerned, that's a two-way street. I think organizations need to understand there's certain roles and requirements that you need to do on your end, how you handle your password and all that good stuff, as well as the encrypted capability of that cloud provider. So I think that's usually in my mind these days, the most recent. That's what I find to be the biggest challenge right now of getting organizations to embrace cloud applications.
Great. Just because you kind of closed up this question is kind of related to those challenges as well. Can you speak to what you've seen as far as how you get people on board? There's always going to be those people that are resistant to change. So how to help create that, let's say for the sake of argument that you're going to want to introduce moving to the cloud. So how do you what have you seen that works as far as selling internally?
The best way is be inclusive rather than exclusive. Don't try to push anything down somebody's throat. And I would also say be creative, and I'm going to give you a quick real-time experience that I had, and that was we were migrating to a cloud-providing email provider versus the on-premise email provider, and I'll let everybody fill in the blanks. And what we said is for the next week, while we do this migration, we're going to have to put you all on this cloud email provider because some of them were absolutely, I'm not going off my on-premise cloud or email provider. About 20% of the employee population was like, you'll put the client, allow me, absolutely, email client will be on there, you can use it. After that week, after a week of those people using the product, and this is the honest-to-God truth, and this was about a 250 employee population. So remember I said 20% were saying that they were absolutely wanted to use the on-premise? When we got done with it, only 2 people required us to load the actual on-premise email client that they were used to. So the point I want to make by that is that was really a tricky way to make it inclusive for everybody, but I think what I've found is when people do become involved and you let them be part of the experience and part of the build-up, it's much easier to get them to agree to use the product. But what also happens with that is that productivity improves too, because now they're comfortable with it, they feel good about it, they understand how it works, they feel like they've been part of something, as opposed to a passive bystander, if you will.
Okay, great. Another question kind of around the cloud, then we'll get to a couple survey questions more related. Is someone's asking, is the cloud generally, you finding companies do this as an all-in proposition, or do companies kind of take one area in and dip their toe in the water? And if they dip their toe in the water, what are you seeing as the most common place where people get comfortable with being in the cloud?
I find both. So it just depends on probably culture of the organization. What have they done in the past? How do they tend to orient themselves towards business? The areas that I think you can look at, we talked about travel and expense management as one. There's plenty of things out there. So let's say you as an organization have a problem. One example I have is I manage a company that has several real estate locations. They're a retail operation. So they have 200-plus retail locations. And they have one person back at the headquarters managing everything from when the toilet's broken or the glass is broken or the key needs to be changed. He has to go to the yellow pages, go online, try to find the locksmith, let's say in Chicago, to come and fix the lock. Well, there actually is, believe it or not, an organization out there that has a cloud-based product that manages all of the real estate, and it goes beyond just managing, hey, I need to fix the broken window, but it manages utilities, it manages the insurance cost. I mean, if you think about your retail location as a house that has the needs of a house, I need to maybe in many cases have landscaping, I need to make sure all the plumbing's working, I need to make sure the T1 line's working. You have all of that completely automated, and now what happens is the folks at the store just go online and say, need a new lock. And then this company manages the whole process on the back end. And even calls the store to say, hey, was the lock fixed by 3 o'clock today? Yes, it was. So there's many different ways you can go about this. I would just say look at your processes that, they're giving you the most pain, if you will, if you want to take a, process-by-process approach and do your homework out there. Find some providers that will fit the need.
Okay, going back to the survey results, someone's just kind of asking a general question. If there were any, you could speak again to if there were any results that really surprised you in the survey results that you found.
In the actual the IMA survey results, no, frankly, it doesn't surprise me. I think every organization today is trying to improve efficiency and all. We're trying to do more with less. So, holistically, it doesn't surprise me. As far as any of the details in there, I kind of, so I'm biased here. I kind of would like to see a little bit more on, what are the really big companies and small companies are using? Have you used any cloud products? That was the one thing I was trying to glean out of this that I didn't see. So maybe in the next survey they could talk about, they're doing it with technology, let's say, to improve processes, but what type of technology? What type of approach are they taking?
Okay. So, so as far as the productivity of the finance department, so if we can take a step back from technology, what are a couple other key areas of opportunity that you see out there for CFOs to leverage in increasing productivity of the Office of the CFO?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, focus on your monthly close. I tend to think everything kind of falls from that, in that as much as we'd like to think all the real-time information is the way we want it, there may be certain types of adjustments that the organization may have to make. Let's take an example, depending upon how you commission your sales folks. Do you commission them on bookings, or do you commission them on actual, the money comes in type thing? So there may be some ways that you have to interact with the system. I think if you look at the system of the close, so I don't mean the IT system, but when you look at how you go about closing the books, I think it's going to be important for you as an organization to look at that and take a certain mindset. As an example, reconciling your bank account. in this day and age, you don't have to wait until the month's out and you get that letter in the mail, the statement in the mail. You can go out to your bank statement every day if you want to. You can actually make a reconciliation process something you do every single day. So what I probably would recommend that finance departments do is look at how they do things, question, why do we continue to do things, let's say this way, when we've done them this way all the time, forever, but there might be ways because of the advances that have happened out there in the business world these days, from the vendors and the suppliers that we work with and need data from, that it's readily available, and there's no reason why we have to wait to start performing certain activities because the month is over. I think when you do that, you'll start to see certain things come out of the woodwork in terms of how you can improve some processes, and I truly believe it as a result of that, when you start improving them internally, you start to realize how they impact the other departments as well, and you can actually see a real rising of the tide with the boats, if you will, if you take that approach.
Okay. Step back a little bit. There's just a question came in around the communication of the data, kind of the data passed back and forth between the cloud systems. Can you speak to a little bit towards towards how that works? Is it seamless? Is there a need to have somebody in house who's a cloud expert, or is what are your thoughts there?
Well, a couple things to say with that question. So number one, the cloud expert. I don't think you need a cloud expert. You're paying for a cloud expert when you buy the application. They're the cloud experts, not you. That's what you need to understand. And you're the finance expert. The next piece is, what happens to the data? So if it's just going out there and we don't know how it's, getting to certain people. In most of these applications, you're going to have certain they're role-based. In other words, you may have somebody at the CFO level, and he or she can see all the detail. You may have somebody at a shipping department level, and they should only see information, that has to do with shipping. So there are certain protections within these systems as to how much and what data they can see. So you can set it up that way. But I also want to bring up one other point, and I said this earlier, that when we talk about security, don't just think that security is inherent within the software. I would say more, in terms of a percentage base, more than 50% in my mind of security of that data is dependent upon you, not only as the leader of the department, but individually to the people who are actually receiving that data. So it's not just a simple, is the IT provider secure? It goes a little bit deeper than that if you're going to do it right and going to make sure that the information doesn't fall into the wrong hands, if you will, right?
Okay, great. We'll have one final question for Tom here in the Q&A session. If you could, as far as becoming, what's next in terms of what you're seeing out there in terms of technology, cloud technology, and then what is the next opportunity that you're seeing as an emerging opportunity to become the transformational CFO and put on that Superman jersey, which was actually a recent photo of Tom.
Yeah, right. I wish. It's a good thing that we don't have the video camera running today. What's next? I could, at a detailed level, one of the companies I work with, we're trying to unlock the contacts. So, people are going to unlock the contact. What does he mean? Well, think about that. Social media, we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, we've got Foursquare, we've got Google+, we've got LinkedIn, we've got all these things. And then we have people that are moving from one location to another, and their cell phone number is changing, and their landline number is changing, or whatever it is. It is almost a full-time job for you as an individual. And imagine a company that has a sales database trying to manage the database of that contact information. So taking it down to that tiniest level, there is a couple companies out there, I think one's better than the other, I'm biased, that is literally trying to crack that nut so that you can have, and this is more than the, I'm trying to think of the name of the company out there that did this, Wolf, who was bought by Comcast, but literally managing that contact in the cloud. So any point in time when you're interacting with your Outlook contacts, or you're interacting with your Google Apps contacts, or whatever email system you use, or if you're on SAP and you pull up a customer record, you can literally have the latest and greatest information on that particular customer, even to the point of they have some tweets that they just sent out, and they're telling everybody in the world how they hate your company and your product. Wouldn't it be pretty profound to have that information at your fingertips real time? So when I talk about things that are changing, that's just a microcosm. You could probably multiply that by 1 billion. There's so much of this stuff going on out there right now, from what's going to change and what's not going to change. When I think about finance, and it kind of goes back to why I really lock onto this work shifting or telecommuting, the fact of not having to be sitting in the office and get your job done. I would argue in the last 5 years of my life, I'm more productive. I get more work done because I don't just sit in the office. My office is anywhere. And, which is all, you can talk about disconnecting from the grid is important at that point, but there's no barrier that really keeps me from getting my job done. Maybe the only exception would be if every single T1 line was cut in the world, but I have global capability, or the satellite capability. So the ability for me to be part of my family's experiences, while at the same time delivering a high level of service and product, say, to clients that we serve, and not having to, say, be sitting in their office or sitting in my office, being able to do that from anywhere in the world. I think finance groups, even the ones where if I'm working for a corporation and I have a staff of 5 or 10 people, I would ask you to think long and hard, why do those 5 or 10 people have to be sitting in the office right next to me all the time? I'm not arguing that we don't need to have some interaction. But when you think about this day and age and how things are changing and how much, our schedules have changed, say, to 30 years ago, not just in terms of our own, but our families and all their involvement and all that type of stuff, serious thought should be given to that, because you have to be able to live your life and enjoy living your life, and you have to be able to do your job. My feeling is we should be able to do both. And I would argue, the stodgy, we're finance, we're, very stiff, if you will. I don't think we have to be that way. I don't think we have to be viewed that way. I think we would be viewed as a very flexible group, getting our job done wherever we need to get it done, getting it done quicker and better and faster, maybe than we've ever done before, and probably having, the best morale of any department in the company. I think, from my standpoint, that needs to be the next big thing, and that's where I'd love to see finance departments and organizations focusing.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom, for your time and insight. For those of you on the webinar, if you'd like us to connect you directly with Tom, please indicate that on the short survey we're going to ask you to take as soon as we close down the webinar. Tom is clearly a leader in his field, an excellent source of information on today's topics. Once again, I'd like to thank our sponsor for today's webinar, NetSuite and Adaptive Planning. Again, if you have any CPE-related questions, please send an email to Tanya Walsh, twalsh@performative.com. And finally, I would like to thank the audience for your valuable time, and I look forward to seeing you at future performative events and also on performative.com. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.